people, I think that, but this is what I think should be for everybody. Like this is a
I agree.
small taste of what a universal basic income society could look like, right? Like this is the little tiny tinkle of like, wouldn't it be interesting if people did have the time and
So
space?
I'm glad you brought this up because it's something I've wanted to talk to you about actually. So like it's been brought up to me by Shani actually, and I thought it was a good point, and I didn't really know what to say to it. And that it's like UBI would be great unless all the corporations then start to adjust prices of things to
Yeah.
match the money that everybody is getting.
So when I
Which
was thinking
is
about that, obviously inflation is the thing that
something
people are
not
the
to
most
do.
nervous about, and I get that. I just think that real laws would have to be written that inflation
Yeah,
can't happen. In other words, you'd
yeah,
have to say for the first 5 years there is no allowance of drastic changes, and there would be actual fines or penalties if you did, and then there would be some sort of scale like it can move 5%, 10%, whatever the thing is as
mm,
things grow, just like normal inflation. So it would take, I think, legislation in order to stop that, like actual very protracted and
mm-hmm.
specific legislation. That's my thoughts on it anyway.
And do you think that like this is something that absolutely everybody should get, like
Yeah.
including rich people? Like,
Yes, but maybe there could be even a thing where people decide, first of all, maybe they're rich because they work really hard and they don't want to work really hard anymore. It could be that they actually want to cut themselves down to being 2 days per week instead of 5 or 6, and that's maybe how they got rich. But I do think that it's better just to spread shot everybody, because the minute you start to do who gets it, who doesn't, and the minute you start to do something called clawbacks, which means that, for example, if you were to work, they'll take that off of your universal basic income. I feel like that's where things are going to fall very, very quickly to the ground. Because if we start to make that distinction, I'm I'm just nervous basically that people won't even want to work if there's clawbacks.
yeah,
Like what?
that certainly would give like incentive to people not to work.
Yeah. What?
Because, yeah,
But what? For example, if we did get that, but it was only really enough to cover rent and food, and then you wanted to go on a trip, or you wanted to buy a car, or you wanted to buy a house, and that would be the incentive to go and work. And I think that people that do work things like construction jobs and that kind of stuff should work fucking hard too. Like so be paid really well is what I'm trying to say. They already work hard. But I think that people should be paid really well if they're doing that as well in these essential jobs, which is hospital workers, restaurant workers, construction workers. Like if people when people do work, I believe they should be paid properly for it as well. And really, what this would do is strip out all of the ridiculous phantom jobs. Okay, and I call them phantom jobs because it means that you're the
yes,
manager, you're the manager of the manager that manages the something. Like they're just creating tiers
like
because we
we
just
have
need
like
jobs.
3 dozen vice presidents of like
Yeah, it's but
whatever.
it's out of
Yeah,
boredom for one. It's boredom and it's also necessity because we still live as though we're living in the industrial era. And as long as it feels like we're living in an industrial era, everyone needs to work and we have to work very hard. And we're kind of judging each other to say, like, well, have you put in your 40 hours this week? And
yeah.
that whole system from its very bottom needs to go through a revolution. So there are very important criticisms of UBI, one of them being inflation, the other being a lack of inspiration to work, and the other like laziness, and the other is that even just what do you call it? Just practically making a change that big is bound to come with us like really fucked up problems. So I'm not trying to speak about it in a utopian sense, but I do think that right now we are experiencing what UBI would be like, except imagine if you could also work a bit as well and you could do some things or go to school, feel comfortable. The elderly, the disabled, children, making sure they always have the food that they need in order to survive. Like those are the three main groups, the vulnerable that would
Mhm.
actually take the brunt of this. And yes, a rich person, maybe they decide not to take it. Maybe there's even a thing where there's a social a coolness because everything has to be cool socially before it really changes. There's a social coolness where you say, hey, look, I recognize that you're offering this to me, but I'm actually good and I'm going to donate it to a program that's going to help people find their passion or whatever, like,
And
and
in the
maybe it's
studies, there was a pretty strong contingent of people that were doing that as well.
not,
That just refused the money in general. They're like, I don't need it. I'm comfortable, right?
right? Like it's great to give people that option, but I do think if we start to choose who does and who doesn't, it's very, especially with if we get a right wing government, they will choose that poor people don't get it. That's what